Okay,
Yeah, I know.
let's going to talk about the new record from Thunder. So it's very good news for the whole hard rock community. So first of all, how do you see the current situation with the pandemic, and how do you foresee the future with the vaccines? I don't know if you're optimistic, or how do you see the situation right now?
Well, I think obviously it's been a terrible year, really terrible year for everybody around the world. Personally, it hasn't been too bad for me. I've got a nice house and a nice garden and lots of open space near where I live, so I've been able to do, most things. And I've never really been the kind of person who needs to go to the shop every 5 minutes, so it doesn't really concern me too much. But I do feel very sorry for these poor people who live cooped up with small kids. I've got kids, but my kids have left home now, so I don't have to worry about homeschooling them and all of that, worrying about their development. My kids are all grown up and perfectly okay, and so I don't have any problems in that regard. But I do feel sorry for these people with small children who live in maybe flats or apartments with no green space. That must be very hard. And old people, that must be very hard too. So, I think it's been horrible. But I am optimistic. I think, now they have vaccines. If only our governments could make sure that they are finally get their shit together and start getting these vaccines into the arms of people. The sooner they can do it, the sooner the world can get back to normal.
Yeah, okay. You have postponed your UK dates until next year, spring next year. I know you have a very special TV show for this weekend. However, do you think you will be able to play any normal gig within this year in 2021, or it will be next year?
Well, I mean, that's the $64,000 question, isn't it? If only I knew. I'm in the dark as well as everybody else. I mean, I would dearly love to be able to play shows. This album is great to play. Great to sing, and if we could, we would be there. So we just have to wait for things to return and to normal, and confidence to be there, so that people can gather in large groups, to be able to go to gigs. But until it's safe to do so, we just have to wait.
Okay, let's want to talk about this really interesting new album, All the Right Noises. Was written before the pandemic hit the world, and it was due to be released last September last year. How could you describe this album? Because personally, I think it's a variety is one word that it could define it, because it has different elements that all the Thunder fans will recognize really soon. How could you describe it musically?
I think it's very hard to describe it musically. I think it's like typical Thunder, but Thunder at our best. For me, it's the songs are very strong. As you said, there's a great variety of songwriting on there. I think it's probably one of the best ballads he's ever written. It's got some great fun songs on there. It's got some of the heaviest tunes we've ever done on there. So I think it's probably all the right noises. That sounds really, I know, but I think it probably is. Some people are saying they think it's the best album we've ever made. I don't know if that's true, but I'll take it. I'm quite happy to take it. After 30 years of making albums, most bands don't get told that the last album is the best.
Yeah.
So, I'm quite happy to take that compliment.
Okay. The first impact is the cover. Why did you decide to include the singing ringing tree sculpture on the cover of this new album?
I think it came about purely and simply because once we'd arrived at the title, we started Googling unusual musical instruments. We had no idea what we wanted to put on the cover, but we knew we wanted to get an image of an unusual musical instrument. And then we stuck it into Google, and up came the singing ringing tree, and we'd never heard of it. But we thought it was such an unusual image, and the fact that it was real, and it was a sculpture, and it was in the UK,
Uh-huh.
was a big deal. So we decided then and there that we wanted to photograph it. Unfortunately, because of the pandemic, we had to wait a few months, but we did go there, or rather Jason, our friend who is a photographer, he's taken photographs of the band for years.
Uh-huh.
We sent him there. Luke went with him, and they took the photographs of it over a 2-day period, all hours of the day and night. And the photograph that you see on the cover of the album was shot at 3:30 in the morning, just as the sun was coming up.
Oh my God.
Yeah, and it was freezing cold.
Yeah.
Yeah. So 2 minutes before they took that photograph, it was black,
Wow.
dark sky, and then the sun came up, and Jason got the photograph. And as soon as they got the photograph, they ran back to the hotel to warm up. But he said there's no Photoshop on the cover.
Uh-huh.
That's the picture. That's what it looked like at 3:30 in the morning last July. So it's pretty stunning.
Really? Good story. Okay. The first single, it was Last One Out, Turn Off the Lights. Some people thought it was about the pandemic, but it was written before. And I think it's about the Brexit. What can you tell me about this song?
You're absolutely right. It is all about Brexit. It's there are some songs on this album that Luke was obviously very angry about when he wrote these songs. A lot of unhappy subjects, but he writes about what he thinks and what he feels. And on the day he wrote that one, he was very frustrated by our UK government. I don't think he, and certainly we don't have a very high regard for them. We think they're fools, and we think they were very wrong to give the people of the UK a chance to decide on leaving the EU. They've spent 30 years blaming the EU for everything that was wrong. So if you give people a chance to vote to leave, they're going to take it. And the EU wasn't to blame for all the things that some of them maybe, but not all of them. Yeah. I think it's very easy when you're the government to blame someone that's far away that has no face. And so, we were very frustrated, not only by the decision, because we thought it was madness, and we were also very, very disappointed and very angry about the length of time it took them to do such a terrible deal. So, that's really where all the misery comes from. There's a lot of anger in that tune. But when he first played it to me, I thought, whoa, this has to be the opening song on the album. This has to be the one, because that way, anybody who thinks that maybe Thunder have gone soft, or maybe we're old and maybe we can't rock anymore, perhaps this will prove them wrong.
Yeah, really. The Brexit is a special problem for a band touring the world in different countries like Thunder. It's a special problem when you are touring everywhere, not only in Europe, but in America and everywhere. It's a bigger problem for you?
It's going to be a huge problem, yeah. Too much red tape, too much paperwork, too many costs, too much time, all spent doing things which used to be simple. And it's going to mean, it's not so bad for us, because we have a good business and we have good fans and, but some young bands are never going to get to play Europe if it still stays the same. And I think that's a real shame.
Okay. Second single is a kind of a party one, Going to the Sin City. It's about, I reckon, the first time you and Luke went to America. I reckon in the 80s, at the end of the 80s. And you found out a different scene there, completely different to the UK. What do you remember of that time?
Yeah, it was an adventure. We spent a week in New York, and we nearly got killed by pimps because we spoke to prostitutes in the street, not knowing they were prostitutes.
Wow.
So that was weird.
Wow.
And then we went to Los Angeles, and we crashed the car on the first night, and we had an episode with the police. And then our very, very cheap motel was burgled, and they stole all our money and our plane ticket, and our fridge broke in our hotel room, so our beer got warm. This was a tragedy, as you could imagine.
Wow.
But musically, it was a great adventure because we saw that whole scene coming out of California and Hollywood, especially Sunset Strip, all those clubs. You know, the boys were prettier than the girls. They had better makeup and better hair than the girls, and the girls had almost no clothes on. And we just thought, this is amazing. And back in London, we thought we were pretty cool. We were playing the Marquee in Wardour Street, a legendary club. You know, we had a band. But when we saw this thing that was going on in Los Angeles, we felt like the guys who'd come to fix the plumbing. We felt very ordinary. So we took all of that energy and we took it back with us, and that was really where Thunder was formed as a result of that trip. A few months later, you know, the Thunder was born, and
wow.
You know, we kind of put it all in there. You know, bands like Motley Crue and Guns N' Roses, and you know, Aerosmith were having a big resurgence, and Poison, all those bands. You know, I mean, it was all going on, and there was such a lot of energy. We loved it, absolutely loved it.
Did you have the chance of attending to any shows, any of those band shows back in the 80s when you were in LA? I don't know.
Yeah, we didn't have any money.
I don't know.
We had no money. We were very poor people. We
Wow.
went to have meetings with record companies. We thought we were going to get to stay with a guy who told us he was our friend. And he said, yeah, you can stay in my apartment. I've got a great big apartment. You can come stay with me. And when we got there, it turns out he wasn't a very good friend, and he was a liar. It turns out because his apartment was not very big. It was probably a bit like a box that you put your shoes in.
Wow.
So there wasn't enough room. So we couldn't stay with him. So we had to spend all our money on a very cheap hotel.
Yeah.
And that meant that we didn't have any money left. So we did some meetings with record labels, and we went to clubs. We did see some bands, but I can't remember who we saw. It was a long time ago, and I was probably mostly drunk, if I'm going to be honest.
I think that one of the secrets of all the right noises is that you have a really, really solid lineup, all the same musicians for more than 2 decades. How have you maintained such a solid lineup? Just a couple of bass player changes in the 90s, but you are all the same for 25 years. How did you do it?
I think it's not something that we think about very often. I think we're very lucky as individuals, as people. We are good friends. We like each other. Mm-hmm. We all have a very similar sense of humor. Mm-hmm. We're not the same people. We're very different as personalities, but we share a very deep understanding about what's right and what's wrong with music and about how to be in a band. And I think we're very lucky. We spend most of our time laughing.
Okay.
Everybody's good at what they do. You know, they can all play, they can all sing. So it's quite easy. It's quite an easy band to be in. You know, we don't fight, we don't argue, we don't disagree. It's very easy. You know, and I think that's probably most of it. I think we're very lucky because a lot of bands don't like each other, and they do argue, and they're all worried about being the most famous one in the band. We don't have any of that in our band. It's just easy. You know, everybody knows what they're doing, and everybody gets on with it. So we're very lucky. Yeah,
and especially Luke and you are one of the iconic hard rock guitar player singer couples in the hard rock scene. You have a really solid music relationship since you were kids, I reckon. You were in the school.
Sure, yeah. No, we met. This is really going to be scary. You know, I need you to promise me that you won't fall off your chair when I tell you this, right?
Yeah.
But Luke and I met in September this year. It will be 50 years since we met each other.
Wow.
That's true.
Wow, you were kids, totally kids.
September 1971, we met. Wow. When we both attended the same school.
Wow.
He lived near the school. I lived a long way away. And it was a school where you had to pass a test to get in there. It's what they call a selective school. Wow. And I lived a long way away. And it wasn't really in my mind to go to this school, but my teacher at that school told my parents that I should go there. And I didn't want to go because all my friends were going to a different school. But I'm glad I did, because on the first day I arrived, we had to have an interview and pass a test. And on the first day I arrived, I'd had all my hair cut off the week before. I had very long hair.
Wow.
And I had it all cut off. My mother made me cut it off because she said, you won't get into the school if you have very long hair.
Yeah.
And so I didn't want to make my mother cry, so I had my hair cut.
Wow.
I didn't want to get it cut, but I did, because I didn't want to upset my mother. So I went there with short hair, and I sat in the reception of the school waiting for my interview. And sitting opposite me was Luke. We didn't know each other, but he had loads of very long red hair.
Wow.
And I looked at his hair, and I looked at my mother, and my mother, very quietly, under her breath, said, he won't get into the school because of his hair. She told me that.
Wow.
And I got into the school. I didn't know if he'd got into the school, but I was determined to find him. So when September came and we started the school, my mission that day was to find the kid with all of the bright red hair.
Wow.
And he was there, and he did get in. And when I went home that day, my mother said, how was your first day at school? And I said, the kid with the hair got in. That was all I told her.
Amazing story. You will have to arrange a celebration in September for these 50 years. Oh man, great.
Yeah, it was 4 years later, I think, when I finally I realized that he was in a band. He played guitar in the band. I didn't sing. And it was 4 years later, 75. I went to his house one day at lunchtime. He lived very close to the school. And I went to his house, and there was a drum kit in the house. And it was the most shiny, amazing thing I'd ever seen. I'd never seen a drum kit in real life before. And I sat next to this drum kit, and it blew my mind. I was convinced that there were angels singing. There were sounds coming out of this drum kit. It just blew my mind.
Wow.
And I couldn't think about anything else for the rest of the day.
Wow.
And I decided I didn't have any money. I couldn't play an instrument. So I couldn't even get an instrument to learn. And I didn't have time. I needed to be near the drum kit.
Yeah.
So the next day, I told Luke I was a singer. And he said, no, you're not. If you were, I would know. And I said, I am. And he said, no, you're not. And this went on all afternoon. Until in the end, out of desperation, I told him I had a microphone, which was a lie.
Wow.
But when he heard I had a microphone, he said, okay, come to my house after school. I'm going to give you some songs to learn. And you come back on Sunday morning and I'm going to give you an audition. If you're a singer, I will know.
Wow.
And that's what happened. And that's how I got in the band with him. I learnt the songs and went back and I sang them. And he offered me the job. And I've been in a band with him ever since.
Wow. Okay. If we go back to Sander, when you released your first record in the beginning of the 90s, and you got a really big success, was it difficult to compete with the grunge bands coming from Seattle back in the day that everything changed in the beginning of the 90s? It was difficult?
We didn't really think about it very much. You know, we were very lucky. A lot of things happened to us very quickly. We went from playing to 30 people to 5,000 people inside of a year. You know, it was amazing. But we didn't really think about it too much. It was only really a few years later when grunge happened that things started to change for us, because suddenly nobody really cared about bands like us anymore. They only really cared about grunge bands.
Yeah.
And that was hard. And not just for us, but for lots of bands like us. You know, a lot of bands disappeared, couldn't compete anymore. We were quite lucky. By then, we still had an audience who wanted to see us play. But it did get very hard to compete during that time. We've been around for a long time now. We've had a couple of breaks during which we did other things. But we just seem to come back to doing it because it's just such an easy band to be in and a hard band to not be in. So, and luckily for us, our audience is still there. They still buy our records. They still buy our tickets. They're still very enthusiastic about what we do. And weirdly, over the last 5 or 6 years, there's probably more of them now than there's been for a long time. So, you know, it's something we're very grateful for.
Back then, you played in Donington in 1990 and 92. Were those shows some of your highlights in your beginning? Monsters of Rock.
Those shows were amazing. Those Monsters of Rock shows were absolutely unbelievable. The first one especially. I mean, there were nearly 90,000 people there. You couldn't see the back of the audience. If you asked them to clap their hands, it kind of happened almost in like a wave, because it took so long for the sound to reach the back of the audience. You know, it was almost like they were clapping in a Mexican wave. They weren't doing it on purpose. It was just the way it took so long for the sound to travel. Incredible gigs. We almost didn't get to do the first one because I lost my voice with 3 days to go. We had a new driver on the bus and he left the air conditioning on and it wrecked my voice and I had no singing voice at all. So I had to go and see a doctor. He filled me up with steroids. He gave me big injections in my butt. And he said he was a doctor. I hope he was. But 3 days later, I wasn't allowed to speak, let alone sing. So I had no idea if we were going to be able to do the gig. When we got there, there was a lot of pressure. Big rumour flying around that we weren't going to be able to perform. But we went onto the stage, and if you see the film, there's a film of that show. You can see my face change when I hit the first big note, because I suddenly realised it's going to be okay. My voice is back. And I think that's a big part of the reason why we had such a good gig, because there was such a lot of adrenaline released when we all realised it was going to be okay. We just ran around the stage like maniacs. And it was a great show, and obviously the rest of it's history. You know, it's kind of gone down in Thunder Legend, you know, as being one of the all-time best shows. And it was a great show. There's no doubt about it. But we've had loads of great shows, so we're lucky.
And talking about your voice, it sounds exactly the same like 30 years ago. What's your secret? How do you do it? Because it sounds exactly, if we compare it with the Backstage Symphony in the last record, it's the same. It's amazing.
Yeah. I don't smoke, and I don't drink very much, so I think that's probably a big part of it. I'm quite fit. I eat well, and I look after myself. So, but apart from that, I don't try very hard. You know, I never did any of the kind of singing lessons or technical stuff. You know, I'm not what you'd call a real singing mechanic. You know, I don't really understand it. I'm very aware of how my voice works. And I know when it works. I know when it doesn't work. I know how to make it work and get it back when it doesn't. I've had a lot of practice. So, apart from that, it's just how it is. I open my mouth and it comes out. So I'm lucky.
And by the way, what are your all-time favorite singers and your influences?
All-time favorite singer. I'd say my inspiration for singing was Paul Rodgers. When I was a kid, when I first heard Free Live, I was blown away. I couldn't believe that somebody that had a powerful voice like that still sounded soulful and bluesy. And that kind of summed up how I felt about music. So I modeled myself very, very much on Paul Rodgers in the early days. But then I heard Stevie Wonder and Marvin Gaye and Otis Redding. And I thought, okay, so this is where Paul Rodgers got it from. You know, Muddy Waters, these kind of guys. And then suddenly that was kind of the way I went. And so I'm torn in terms of influence between rock and soul. I like soul music. I like blues music. And I like a bit of rock music. I can't do anything about it. I sound like a rock singer, but I really would like to be a soul singer, really.
Okay. I I could go on with the interview for hours, but I think we have timing. Just to finish the interview, after so many years in the music business, 30 years with Thunder, almost 10 years with Preparacin back in the 80s, 40 years, more than 40 years in the music business. What feelings bring you the music? What is the music for you? I don't know how to express it. What feelings brings you the music? What's for you the music?
I think there's something unique about performing music. It's something that it's almost impossible to feel if you don't perform music.
Mm-hmm.
When you're in a band and you're all playing a song together, there's something very special that happens, and it's like a drug.
Mm-hmm.
You can't get it any other way. It's like a unique drug, you know. And that's why I said earlier, you know, being in Thunder is like a very easy band to be in, and it's a very hard band not to be in,
mm-hmm.
because it's just great fun doing it, you know. And I think that's where you know, the more you do it, the better you get. And I think we're just getting better and better. And I honestly feel like we're just getting going, you know. I feel like we've been very slow learners, because we now feel like we're just getting to the point where we might just make our best record ever. I don't know if that's this one or it might be the next one. We'll have to find out.
Mm-hmm. Okay. And I forgot to ask you about the bonus tracks of this new album. Are those bonus tracks from the same sessions of the album, or you recorded during the lockdowns?
There are 4 studio songs that were recorded during the same sessions as the album. We recorded 15 tunes.
Mm-hmm.
We did 3 sessions. One in the summer of 2019, one in November 2019, and one in January 2020 last year. And over the course of those 3 sessions, we recorded 15 songs.
Mm-hmm.
From the 15, we chose 11, which left us 4. The record label wanted to do a bonus CD, but we thought, well, only 4 songs. That's not going to be a very good value CD for fans.
Mm-hmm.
So we decided maybe to go into the studio and to re-record some of those songs, but live. So we brought in some girl singers and a keyboard player who also sang. And we just threw the songs around for like 2 or 3 days to come up with live arrangements.
Mm-hmm.
And then we just recorded them. We played them live. So there were no fix-ups, no overdubs, no going back and doing it again. We just did them. And so there's 8 songs that are 8 songs that are also on the album, but these are 8 live versions of those songs. Mm-hmm. So on the bonus CD, you have those 8. They were recorded last summer between lockdown 1 and lockdown 2.
Okay.
Dived in the studio for like 5 days.
Okay. And I think that you're releasing the album on cassette version as well. It's really curious.
Yeah, and vinyl. The vinyl album's got like a pop-up singing ringing tree inside. So when you lift it out, the tree comes out, almost like threatens to bite you on the face. Yeah, it's good.
Wow, amazing. Yesterday, we knew that Lou Ottens, the cassette inventor, died with 94 years. Did you like to listen to the cassettes when you were in the 80s, or you prefer vinyls?
I love cassette. I loved it. I thought it was the best invention. It was so good. It sounded terrible, but I think it was the most magical thing. Yeah. I can remember very clearly the first time somebody showed me a cassette in a case, and the guy gave it to me and said, "See if you can get that out of there." And I couldn't work out how to open the case. It took me 10 minutes. It was the most amazing thing. I know it sounds real simple now, but I'd never seen one before. And for me, it was like a magical thing. And the fact that you could just put it in and press play and hear music, and the fact that you could record music on it just blew my mind. I loved it. I absolutely loved it.
What band?
So many cassette players. I loved them all.
What band was that first cassette you saw? What band?
First cassette.